Disaster Recovery Institute International. DRI International. Disaster Recovery Institute International.
It is my great honor to welcome you to our second DRI Resilience Excellence Summit, a special event designed as a way to give back to our professional community during this period of prolonged uncertainty. There are many ways to describe the global events that have unfolded over the course of the last 2 years. Overwhelming, uncertain, and pivotal come to mind, but also courageous, caring, and resilient are a few ways that we might describe our collective experience. We all changed and grew in many ways, both personal and professional. The last 2 years have been difficult for everyone, and we still face enormous challenges as individuals and as professionals. I want to acknowledge the ongoing challenges presented by COVID-19 and also share what DRI is doing to continue assisting you. Our goal at DRI is always to provide you with learning-focused opportunities that will add value to your certification, help you grow as professionals, and empower you to give back to your community. During the pandemic, that goal has felt more meaningful than ever. We worked hard to bring you quality virtual programming to support you through your response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the seemingly never-ending onslaught of cyber attacks, severe weather events, supply chain disruptions, and the like. Our thousands of resilience professionals around the world have been at the forefront of the response to this public health crisis. This ever-growing continuity community rose to the challenge brought on by this pandemic while responding to other crises as well. We have tremendous faith in your skills and dedication. We are beyond proud to be associated with such tireless and innovative professionals. We at DRI have also worked hard to think up new ways to serve you during this time. DRI has added value to your certification and grown our global community. Demand for resilience professionals keeps growing. We now have certified over 20,000 professionals globally across more than 100 countries, 40% of whom are outside the United States. Year-over-year growth remained strong across every certification track, especially the audit program. We saw a record number of cyber resilience applications in a single year, and organizational certification is also continuing to grow. We assessed an international telecommunications company and a healthcare organization. During the last 2 years, DRI helped keep your skills sharp with educational programming. In March of 2020, we moved to 100% remote training for all DRI courses and continued with this policy until the conference earlier this year. We learned that this format actually works really well in some cases, and we'll continue to offer a mixture of in-person and online options to accommodate different needs moving forward. Demand surged for our core business continuity courses, validating the work we all do as a profession. 16% of our students also added specialties like cyber resilience, public sector, healthcare, or audit. And during this time, we have continued to innovate. We still offer lots of ways to continuously improve and earn continuing education activity points, CEAPs, from wherever you are. We know it's been a little tougher to get those recently. That's why we introduced 4 new workshops to our popular workshop series. Business continuity exercises to help you bring theory into practice. Pandemic preparedness for organizations to better navigate the unique challenges we are facing. Mindfulness practices to improve incident management, an innovative science-based course to help safeguard the mental health of your team. And crisis communications and media relations to support an effective crisis communications planning process, as well as to sharpen your messaging skills. whether you use them internally or externally. And for this year, we have reassembled the Professional Practices Committee. They are currently hard at work on the next iteration of this cornerstone document, incorporating all of the lessons we have learned since the last version was launched in 2017. This means that we will be revising all of our core course materials before next year's conference, including our 2 fundamentals courses, BCLE 2000 and BCP 501, and the Master's Case Study Workshop, BCP 601. For those of you who are already certified, we will be offering our one-day refresher course, BCP GAP, to help keep you up to speed on what has changed, and more importantly, why it changed. We know that education is just the beginning, and we are always looking for ways to connect and engage with all of you. Since in-person was not possible, we held a host of virtual events recently, including last year's version of this summit, our virtual Awards of Excellence, DRI KL 2020 and 2021 in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, 2 virtual DRI days in Sao Paulo, Brazil, a virtual DRI Canada reception for Continuity and Resilience Today, more than a dozen free webinars to highlight our work as the thought leadership of you, our certified professionals in English and Spanish. We reached out to other professions. We gave over 50 speaking engagements by 7 DRI representatives at virtual industry events, reaching new audiences, notably through the Can Do Innovation Summit in Glasgow, Scotland, the Corporate Directors Forum, where we talked directly to board directors, the Global Association of Risk Professionals, or GARP, and the American Meteorological Society. We broadened our outreach. Our over 15 committees address diverse topics worldwide and are a fantastic way to engage. We liaise with other organizations to promote your certification and share your stories. To name just a few recent alliances, in the world of academia, we joined with Harvard University's National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, or NPLI, to develop a new report, COVID-19 and Analysis of Leadership Styles and Outcomes. Learn more about this research by downloading the pair of white papers from our website and theirs, as well as watching the recording of our LinkedIn Live event that we held special at this year's conference. We also contributed to Columbia University's NYC COVID-19 Oral History Narrative and Memory Archive. With governmental and international organizations, we have been active in our role providing technical assistance. We are now a national initiative for cybersecurity careers training provider. We worked with the International Science Council to set a global research agenda, participated in an OCHA UNDP Connecting Business initiative. We joined the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction's ARISE Global Board and contributed to the Sendai Commitments portal. We served as an international organization liaison and US TAG member of the International Standards Organization, or ISO, Technical Committee 292 for Security and Resilience. And over the last couple of years, our media profile has substantially increased. We've been featured over 100 times in the media through articles, including Forbes, and dozens of interviews, including with CNBC, Fox News, BBC, the Financial Times, and multiple appearances on NBC, LX, and Cheddar News. Outreach is core to our mission, but so is giving back. The DRI Foundation has been busy donating to community-based organizations to help those in need, as well as awarding scholarships to students. You can apply now if you are certified in good standing and have a child of college age. The application period is currently open, so go to the website and check that out. We've given scholarships to veterans. Over 700 of them have been awarded to those transitioning into the business continuity profession. And the Women in Business Continuity Management Committee has also awarded 37 scholarships, as well as offered many networking opportunities. Be sure to check in for day 2 of this summit to learn more about the great work that is being done through the DRI Foundation. I am proud of what we have accomplished to keep the DRI spirit alive during the last few years. But nothing beats the power of in-person connection. I was thrilled that we were able to host our 10th conference in person in February of this year. And I'm excited to announce that DRI 2023 will be in the Tech Hub, Austin, Texas. I don't know about you, but I am so excited to go back there, maybe catch some live music, and definitely eat brisket every single day. We recognize that not everyone will emerge from the pandemic unscathed. Our hearts are heavy for the losses that have touched the lives of our community. The pandemic also reminds us of vulnerability, compassion, and the value of reflection. DRI is here with you to celebrate the good moments, work through the challenges, and to honor the accomplishments of our resilience community. While no one knows for sure how this situation will evolve, we are steadfast in our belief that there will be many great stories of resilience to tell. A few quick pieces of business before we continue on with the exciting programming that we have planned for you. I'd like to thank, in particular, our day one sponsor, BlackBerry, for their continued support of DRI and our programming. They supported this event last year, our conferences, and also today's special event. We really appreciate your ongoing support. I'd also like to thank our speakers and the amazing team here at DRI. I want to take a moment to say how proud I am of our global team and to acknowledge what a great job they've done to keep DRI running seamlessly in a 100% remote environment over an extended period of time. They have remained positive and diligent in difficult circumstances and are the reason why we have been able to continue delivering uninterrupted service. I am forever in their debt. I'd like to congratulate all the finalists and winners of the Awards of Excellence for your contributions to the industry and your professional accomplishments. The winners will be honored over the course of these 3 days. As a reminder, please register for each day of the summit separately. If you only registered for day 1, please visit our website to register for days 2 and 3 as well. You may apply for 2 CEAPs for each day of the summit for a total of 6. After the initial broadcast, the summit will be available for viewing on our website. All registrants will receive an email when it has been posted to our site. A schedule was emailed to all registrants and can be found on our website. Please follow the updated summit schedule that was emailed to you and is also on our website, as times and speakers may have changed since you registered. With that, I'd like to thank you all again for attending this special event and continuing to support our vision of a more resilient world. Thank you.
For today's keynote, we're proud to have with us Vice Admiral Mike LeFever. He is retired from the United States Navy after 38 years of service, finishing his military career as the Director of Strategic Operational Planning at the National Counterterrorism Center, within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He also served as both the Commander of the Office of Defense Representative in Pakistan and the Commander of the Joint Task Force in Pakistan, leading all U.S. armed forces in that country between 2008 and 2011. He currently serves as Chief Executive Officer for Concentric, a risk management consultancy that specializes in delivering strategic security and intelligence services. Reflecting his deep experience with and commitment to developing high-performance leaders and teams, LeFever also served as a performance ambassador and speaker for Lineal Collective and Arena Labs, and as a senior advisor and mentor for leaders in the private sector, the USG's National Defense University Senior Level National Security, Leadership, and Warfighting courses, and the USG Joint Forces. Vice Admiral LeFever, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, it is great to be with you to be part of this Disaster Recovery Institute International DRI Forum. I'm Mike LeFever. I retired as a Vice Admiral in the U.S. Navy after 38 years of service, graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy. I was a surface warfare officer and served on various ships on both East and West coasts. I was privileged to have command of a destroyer squadron, a strike group, and 2 separate joint task forces in Pakistan. My last military assignment was as the Director, Strategic Operational Planning at our National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC. Since retiring, I have followed my passions of leadership, service, and building high-performance teams. The highlights have been working as a senior advisor and a mentor at the McChrystal Group, a mentor with the Joint Staff Training Division in support of military leadership development, and now as the Chief Executive Officer of this dynamic security and risk company called Concentric. I also serve as a performance ambassador for two breakout companies in the areas of performance, which are Liminal Collective and Arena Labs, which are truly invigorating. What I would love to do today is talk about four things: my experience in the large earthquake in Pakistan in 2005 and 6, the lessons from that experience working with the interagency and international community, the anatomy of a crisis, having experienced leading the US military effort in the earthquake, and later in 2010 for the massive floods along the Indus. And finally, how I developed the resilience to navigate a career in the Navy with worldwide deployments, combat tours, leading humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts overseas and in national security. Let me share a story that was most impactful to me personally and professionally, is when I was called upon by General Abizaid, then the commander of the Central Command, CENTCOM, to lead the US military's response to the devastating 2005 earthquake in Pakistan. Talk about uncertainty, ambiguity, and adversity. Throughout my career, I found myself in situations I never expected nor would have ever anticipated. Here I was in 2005, I was a strike group commander of 6 ships, 2 submarines, and air wings, and Marines and sailors of 5,500 exceptional men and women. I had just finished the world's largest multinational exercise off the coast of Egypt called Bright Star, and my Marines were getting offloaded into Iraq to support the historic elections in 2005, and they were going to be in Fallujah. When I got ordered to fly into Pakistan to lead the US earthquake relief efforts, I had less than 24 hours to prepare for landing in Pakistan with a small team of 7 trusted members of my leadership team from my strike group. Here I was, I landed at Benazir Bhutto Airport in Islamabad at 01 o'clock in the morning, in an environment reminiscent of the bar scene at Star Wars. Piles of emergency supplies, donated clothing, and emergency response teams, both non-government organizations as well as government organizations from around the world, looking in any way to help possible. So there I was, an Admiral, 700 miles from saltwater, in a country I had no experience with, and leading joint and coalition forces in my first ever humanitarian assistance and disaster relief effort. In addition, the lethality and physical destruction of the earthquake were overwhelming. 78,000 people were killed, 177,000 were injured, and there was over 3.5 million people now left homeless, with winter rapidly approaching in the Himalayas and the Hindu Kush. To this day, it is still considered the benchmark for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And we end it with the highest approval rating for the United States ever in Pakistan. I have so many takeaways from this experience, which really served to crystallize my leadership philosophy, especially in leading through crisis and uncertainty. The first is the critical importance of establishing a common understanding of the strategic end state, what I would call the end game first. What I mean by this is having a North Star for whatever you are doing. For me, in Pakistan at this time, it was providing humanitarian relief and improving US-Pakistan relations. Everything I did, every decision I made was aligned with these 2 goals: for mission success and to avoid mission creep. It kept us all focused and gave us confidence in the way forward. The second key takeaway was the critical role of relationships, which to me are fundamental to impactful leadership. I've always said in my leadership or command philosophy that my top 3 priorities are relationships, relationships, and relationships. And you know what? You can have them in any order you want, but those are the top 3. So I was in Pakistan a second time as a senior military representative and commander of all US forces in Pakistan from 2008 all the way through the bin Laden raid in 2011. And because of the relationship I had built during the earthquake with the Pakistanis from my first tour, I found myself one of the very few people the Pakistan military would even talk to after the US killed bin Laden deep in Pakistan territory. How did that happen? I would argue that the ability of a relationship to endure difficult times, like the bin Laden raid, to survive a breach of trust is dependent on how you built that relationship. The strength of trust is based on delivering what you say you're going to and doing what is right for the mission, for the relationship, and not just what you think is right at the time. It is also about how you think through in advance the second and third order effects of your decision and decide on a risk mitigation strategy to protect that relationship as much as possible. In just about every critical decision that I had to make in my career that I can think of, it was more important for me to consider the impact on key relationships for the strategic long term than on being right now in the tactical sense. I think you develop this over time. It's not a transactional series of events, but taking the time, transaction by transaction, to nurture the building of a relationship. The third key takeaway is taking the time to understand the environment, which is discerning the critical dynamics, influencers, and power differentials, and how to effectively adjust and adapt. In Pakistan, this meant suspending my personal and organizational ego to figure out when to take charge and when to follow. And it was drafting on this wonderful concept we have in the US military command and control structure called support it versus supporting, which is very situation dependent. But this is a key concept of leadership that works in all situations and forestalls the ego battles that undermine agenda that is usually what makes organizations or companies fail. In essence, the supported commander is the one that all the other elements align behind to ensure the success of that element or command. It signifies that this person and the group they lead is best suited to lead this endeavor, and it could be for a variety of reasons. It might be because of a relationship established. It might be their expertise, or it might be aligned on the strengths and capabilities of what they do. Then consequently, if you're listed as a supporting commander, that means you devote your resources to the success of the supported commander and really the success of the mission. So for example, in Pakistan, the US military was almost considered the elephant in the room. There's nobody that can operate at scale and speed that the US military has. Strategic airlift, strategic sea lift, able to move mountains in timely fashion, and no one else understands that. And so even though I had the majority of resources and capabilities in Pakistan, I led my team with this mindset that we are there as a supporting commander, and our mission was to support the US mission to include all the interagency and coalition partners. It was not just about putting the spotlight on the US military's contribution, it was about the overall mission success. So in this regard, always remember that even the smallest element can make a difference in the outcome. I've always strived to harness the talent, the diversity, the culture, and the unique contributions that truly have impact to its fullest. An example, in Pakistan, the Australians sent a small medical clinic and 2 helicopters, literally pale in comparison to over the 1,500 folks I had on the ground, the 30+ helicopters, multiple strategic sea lift of C-17 cargo flights, 2 major hospitals, a MASH unit, the 212 MASH, and a Navy Marine Corps hospital. Think of capabilities like a Los Angeles General Hospital, multiple operating rooms, and intensive care units and beds in areas that had almost never seen doctors before, up in the affected areas. it was phenomenal to see. In addition, we had the CBs, the construction battalions and engineers, and the list goes on capabilities that provided. But the Aussies and their small contingent, we sent them to a very remote location along the contentious line of control and only reached by air. But they had tremendous impact and were key to the success of the mission. And the funny thing is that every organization, whether it's the US military, my company now, or your company, they all have their own culture, their own values, their own power differentials, ways of doing business, ways of making decisions. But understanding those dynamics in your environment is key to how to navigate in those environments. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was this anatomy of a crisis. I also learned from these experiences that there are recognizable phases of a crisis or disaster. Every crisis, no matter the scale or scope, follows a unique path. And once you know that path, you have a far greater chance of figuring out the end game because you can utilize your resources to the best of your abilities. And each phase establishes a subtle difference also in your decision-making space. So in 2010, when I was back in Pakistan as the senior military rep, as the commander of the defense representative of Pakistan, a new disaster arrived. It was late summer in Pakistan. It's monsoon season, and the country is no stranger to heavy rainfall. This year saw a monsoon of epic proportions that loomed over the country, deploying a torrent of endless water. By mid-August, 17 million acres of Pakistan were underwater, over 500,000 homes were destroyed, and 6 million people were displaced along the avenues of the Indus River. While this situation was very different from the earthquake, I still had this sense of déjà vu and also a greater sense of confidence in how to respond, what was needed as the situation unfolded and evolved. So how do you recognize where a crisis begins and ends? I would argue any crisis, again, no matter the scale, I would offer has 4 phases. First phase is what I would call the 911 moment. This is the moment a crisis begins. You enter an emergency mindset. The status quo has been upended by this unexpected event, activity, or evolution. And it's time to drop whatever you were doing and get to work. As a leader, you have to make decisions to sustain with high uncertainty. It is an overwhelming moment that requires immediate action to save lives, prepare for major changes, and address fears. This phase can really vary in length depending on the scope of the crisis. For example, if you cut yourself while preparing dinner, the 911 moment begins with the first drop of blood and ends the moment you've stopped the bleeding. The 911 moment for a natural disaster generally lasts as long as the event itself in most cases. If you're a startup company, maybe that 911 moment could last until you've attained some manner of revenue balance. But you have to be prepared to endure whatever the circumstances require. In phase 2, it's planning for that second and third order effects. In Pakistan, as the waters receded, the true extent of damage was revealed. We had to address the follow-on effects of the flood. And one of the first concerns was the sheer number of displaced people. A human being needs water, shelter, and food to survive, kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Eventually, there would be other needs that had to be met. But the most important step was creating a stable environment. Phase 2 is still a time of careful action because the wrong decision could pull you back into phase 1. And so these second and third order effects can be devastating if not properly addressed. So for example, in the floods, as well as the earthquake, these displaced people, they're exposed to outside contaminants and germs in incredible numbers. They had a focus on sanitation and water sanitation, and we had a focus on educating the refugees on procedures to keep them safe from dysentery. The key characteristic of this phase is to note that if none of these solutions are permanent, but you're making decisions that move you forward, but they are not the final word on the situation. I would say phase 3 starts at this understanding of a steady state. There's a phrase thrown around a lot during the aftermath of any disaster, the so-called new normal. It means accepting a new world and accepting a new status quo. Phase 3 is a steady state of being, but is not a sustainable normal environment, or rather it can't be a self-sustainable environment. The steady state is marked by routine and reset. And this is a time that tasks can be dropped, mistakes can be made, and you run the risk of backsliding. And it's not because of laziness, it's fatigue. Everyone has lived in this state of potential failure for so long under the high stress of saving lives in phase 1, understanding that if you don't get phase 2 right, you could fall back into phase 1. And so it's still hard to see that there's a bright light in the future. And so you have to keep your team focused, keep them motivated. You need to be ready to give them a break so they can recover some of their energy. And everyone will have a different level of tolerance, and that includes you. There is no shame in needing to get your head back in the game, and in fact, it'll make you stronger overall. One of my tentpole goals during both disasters was the idea to leave the stage with them still clapping. As a guest in Pakistan, it was important for me not to overstay my welcome. While the nation was certainly grateful to have the help in recovery, the US military wasn't exactly invited in to stay for the long haul. And so there's a fine line between supporting a recovering country and taking over the work that the local government and culture would rightly do. So I wanted to exit this situation with the country still grateful for the US presence, not so soon that it felt like I was abandoning them, but not so late either that we had to be told to leave. That moment appeared on the horizon that turns really into what I would call phase 4. And so I knew from my time during the earthquake that Pakistan would eventually reach a moment of equilibrium. Infrastructure would be stable, homes were starting to be rebuilt, and all that was kind of left was the rebuild, reconstruction, the cleaning up, trying to restart normal life. It wasn't going to go back to what existed before this horrific event, but it was going to be what was going to continue to be normal for the rest of the time there. So that phase 4 is return to normalcy. As strange it may seem, people really grow accustomed to a crisis. Human beings are remarkably adaptable. As the steady state continues on, now that light at the end of the tunnel seems to grow brighter and brighter. And at that point, for me, I turned over my operations from the military side to USAID as a continuation of the US effort aid in building back better. It was a coordinated timeline with no surprises to the Pakistan government or military in defining the end of disaster and on to rebuild and reconstruction. There were no surprises of my game strategy. And it was a natural, logical conclusion that the US was still going to be involved. So in a natural disaster, it was a little easier to see when this area was standing up of its own 2 feet. For the earthquake, roads were starting to clear, deliveries resuming, supplies were coming in through normal pipelines. It was springtime, the planting season. People were moving from the refugee camps back to their villages. And so they were no longer necessary. And so, but on the other hand, with more personal crises, it comes down to when you feel there's a sense of stability and momentum. This really leads me to my last point, which is about personal resilience at a crisis. No matter what role you're in, your ability to take care of yourself is critical to your ability to navigate an impact during a crisis. So my definition of resilience, drawing from both the American Psychological Association and the world of high performance, is the ability to adapt to life's uncertainty, ambiguity, and adversity. which I also think characterizes definition of resilient people. It is the capacity to perform consistently under pressure and develop and grow, which is what makes it distinct from just bouncing back or grit or mental toughness, which to me is just about powering through and survival. So from all that I've read about and from my own personal experience, I think there are 4 foundational elements to building personal resilience. Self-care is absolutely my number 1, which is the set of habits, practices, and rituals that I have developed that help me to recover and reset. For me, my top self-care ritual, my mental health break, as I call it, is exercising. Every day, no matter what, moving, usually with some degree of intensity and duration, really frees my mind up, stimulates my muscles, and relieves the stress of whatever I'm dealing with. I would say number 2 is self-awareness, and is all about realistically assessing your strengths and weaknesses and your impact on others. A critical part of self-awareness is understanding your stress triggers, whether they're physical, emotional, or cognitive. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Andy Walsh, a global leader in elite human performance, was at Red Bull Olympic ski team, and he teaches the importance of developing a pattern of recognition of where you are in your own stress curve. The intent is to develop the ability to self-modulate before stress impacts your ability to respond well or robs you of an opportunity because you lack the energy to take advantage of it. It is as simple as tracking what causes you stress, how you respond to it over a 2-week period as a first step to creating your own stress mitigation plan. For me, it's a simple technique of box breathing when I find myself getting anxious or uncomfortable. Third is managing your mindset or self-talk. All of us, in some way, shape, or form, allow negative thoughts to self-sabotage, and it's all about recognizing when you're heading down this path and shifting your inner dialogue into something more positive. The power of visualization, seeing your success or way through adversity, is a great way to make that shift. Lastly, it's how you stay connected in the relationships you have with your team, your people, your networks, and family and friends. Having a strong network is key to refreshing and recharging for me to solve problems and find new opportunities. As you saw my story above, it's that power of relationships. So in conclusion, I've covered a lot of ground here. And what I really want you to come away with is that the key to navigating crises and challenges is understanding the environments you find yourselves operating in, maintaining your focus on the relationships that you need to succeed, anticipating what is coming next and adjusting accordingly, and paying attention to your own energy needs and resources. So if you're a leader, I hope you came away with this talk with a framework of how to anticipate your leadership and uncertainty. And if you work or support a leader in crisis, you know what questions you need to ask and how you can best contribute to the success of the mission. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Mike, thanks for sticking around to answer some questions. And I think the first one is, as you mentioned, building relationships is so important to gaining your objectives. What kind of strategies have you developed to recognize what's more important to consider, whether it's the long-term strategy versus something more short-term? And then what are the risks that we run if we prioritize those short-term objectives?
Hey, thanks, Russell. Great question. And it's really an honor to be able to delve into some of the articles from the talk. For me, long-term relationships is always the best strategy that I always had in my view. What I see in the short term is always this, they become very transactional. And you don't really focus on that strategic end state or end game, but there may be times for that short-term interest may only prevail if there is a question of, legality, rule of law, or a foundational national interest that would make it more so that you would look just for a short-term relationship. But even if it is a chance encounter, the ability to always see this as a long-term engagement helps me shape how you're going to interact and treat that individual, since you're never going to know when you might come across that individual again. It does allow you to help shape that future of this relationship in the beginning. I'd look back and, if I thought about, not knowing, I find myself in Pakistan and not thinking that I'd ever go back in an assignment. And here I am, 3 years later as the senior military rep. I often wonder is how that would have gone, how I treated my colleagues in the Pakistan military or government, or even folks with the UN that work so hard on the relief efforts during the earthquake, to only see, look at the short term and what the future might have held. Because what was interesting is in the floods that ensued some years later when I was there as a senior rep in 2010, the horrific floods, ironically, many of the same people that I operated with the earthquake were back in that same kind of environment, either from the UN, from the Pakistan military, or civilian leadership from Pakistan. And it was a wonderful, because everybody had this feeling of almost deja vu. Here we were back, the band got back together again, and we were able to really move the ball forward and do a lot of things that in the earthquake took a little bit more time to develop. We knew that this was the success of how we did it and to be able to move forward. And so those long-term relationships really paid off in quite a way, as well as, that was the strategic goals that General Abizaid gave me is, provide humanitarian relief and improve U.S.-Pakistani relations. And so that always became a mark for me.
You talked about understanding your environment and knowing how to adapt. So regarding that, how do you recommend navigating organizational relationships that have their own culture and values so that everyone is getting what they need or want out of those relationships?
That's a great question too, because for me, it's, in these relationships and creating this environment and the cultures that are unique to everyone, it's not a question of everyone getting everything they want out of that relationship. Mm-hmm. For me, I think it's more of a matter of that everyone sees that their interests are being accommodated to the extent possible. So in that, you work within the system to see where you are able to work together and where you can help shape the things of the future.
Well, talking about shaping things for the future, in this field, the field of resiliency and business continuity, we talk way too much about the new normal. It gets discussed all the time, especially since in our case, the new normal doesn't stay new or normal for very long. Certainly, we're all dealing with the evolving reality and that creates stress and fatigue. And how do you and your teams, or how have you and your teams in the past dealt with the stresses that come from operating in a continued crisis environment? And you've got to deal with the crisis, but you've got to emotionally deal with the wreckage that's leaving, as well as getting your job done, which is paramount.
Yeah, another great question. As I went through the different phases, I look back at that, that phase one, that 911 moment, and then that phase two of understanding the second, third order effects to make sure you have the separation of the camps right, the sanitation right, the water. And, what was so obvious in, even my battle rhythm, it started very early in the morning. It was meetings with the ambassador and the country team. It was out to see the great men and women that were, engaged in the operation, as well as the strategic dialogue with the Pakistan military and the Pakistan government, then come back, finish up a roundup meeting. And then because of the time difference, here I was talking with, Department of Defense, my bosses at Central Command, or even the White House, giving them status updates on this experience. And what you realize is, boy, you can only operate in that crisis mode for just so long. And I think about those first, couple months, man, we were running on adrenaline and passion, because, for the earthquake, I mean, the drive that this was about saving lives and helping Pakistan in its time of needs was just so overpowering that you let some of the things that you would treat yourself to that we talk about later, and they talked about resiliency. But it's that, your effort is to drive to reestablish some semblance of familiarity, I think, in the quickest way possible. For me, in the earthquake, for that community to kind of see some light at the end of the tunnel, they were getting nourishment from the food supplies, they were getting shelters. And then we were able to do things with USAID and the CBs that I had to help build schools so the children and families could see some return to a structure. The other thing that's always amazing in a crisis, and I know you do that so extremely well at the DRI, is, boy, when you're in a crisis mode, it really, I used to laugh, boy, it really helps define what is truly important in your work and lives. And it really establishes priorities of what really needs to get done for the mission, and then what can wait for a later time.
And kind of a sidebar to that, to get a little deeper, we understand what you're doing for the locals, the folks that have been impacted by the event. And we know what you're doing as far as communication with your management and the folks that sent you to do the job. What about your team? How do you take care of your team in that crisis situation that it seems to be ongoing, but they have to live with it and they have to sleep at night?
Yeah, great question, because, boy, it was very austere conditions. We had remote camps out up along the line of control. You could only reach it by air. These people were self-sustaining. And so it was really important that I would go out, on a daily routine basis to visit all our sites and where our people are in these very remote locations. The Pakistanis were wonderful. They provided support. We were sometimes embedded in their encampments, at their military bases, or at their police headquarters, and they were wonderful. But boy, that strain day to day, an environment in the initial stages, just eating MREs, having to do field dressing, field washing and sanitation, and then seeing the horrific insights of what this devastation did to both the people and to their infrastructure. And it takes a toll on folks. So I set up a routine of, check-ins, but I also had a flow for the people that were stationed out in these remote areas to bring them back on a helicopter for several days at a time back to Islamabad, and set them up at the embassy to get hot showers, warm food, a chance to decompress, a chance to really, understand the impact of what they were seeing and what they were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so we set up a routine progress to ensure that people had a break from that incredible stress and the images and the feeling and the intensity of the environment that they lived in.
Okay, so beyond those strategies for your own team, okay, so you've got the strategies within your own organization that are bringing, people in and out of the field, getting them the stuff that they need. How did you encourage it to work outside the teams you were working with? So, I mean, you've got U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen working for you, but you're also working with these Pakistani counterparts. You have how much control, how much input did you have on developing those strategies for them?
Yeah, that's another great one, because we had quite a mix. I think at one point there was, I don't know how many, it must have been 30 or 40 different nations. NATO brought some forces in. The international community responded in great lengths. There was probably close to a different 100 or so different non-government organizations that were there to support. And so what I tried to do, and it was really, and a lot of times had some great discussions with my Pakistani counterparts, is that, when dealing with these outside teams, what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to lead and demonstrate that the resilience strategies that were working for my team and all its individuals was a good model for them to adapt as well, of how they considered, taking care of their own and taking care of other folks that supported them. And we'd often have these wonderful sessions when I met with my counterparts over tea and finding out and getting to know them better. But it always, no matter what, in most conversations, it came about the men and women of the U.S. military and the U.S. aid organizations that supported us, about how they behaved, how they treated, their passion for others. They were sent around the world to this remote area, but were dealing with great passion and comfort for the folks and the maladies and the people that were affected by this earthquake, as though they were part of their own family. And it was that image and that model that was so powerful that moved quite a bit, that the Pakistani government at the end of it honored my whole team with this award that they commissioned called the Star of Sacrifice. And in it, it was the ability to how people from around the world came to support them, and the passion for dealing with human lives and humanity and the treatment of the folks that were affected. So it was just really quite an honor and quite moving.
Excellent. One of the things that we here at DRI and at the DRI Foundation are very proud of is our records for being a booster for veterans coming out of the military or been separated for a while, bringing them into the resilience field as a civilian career choice. From your perspective, how do you see the overlap between military experience and resiliency in the private sector? Business continuity as a profession in the private sector.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by what you and DRI does for the veterans. At Concentric, where I work too, we're big at looking on veterans to join. Because what we found, and I'm sure you find the same way, is that the wonderful women and men, they develop skills through their military training and experience that set them up well in this field. Whether it's the planning aspect to involve developing courses of actions, understanding the branches and sequels that could ensue, or these alternate paths to accomplish the mission or be prepared. That I think most of them have this experience that they deal also with uncertainty and ambiguity, and in many instances under lots of stress for some of them. And I know I seek out those attributes for the folks that I work with at Concentric. And what's also fascinating is that with our client base, we have some family offices and high net worth individuals that nowadays, maybe because of COVID or others, that people are really interested in understanding that, wow, I should have had a plan. They might have had that plan on the shelf that was collecting dust, but now the ability to understand, wow, what a pandemic does, and what to be able to be prepared for, and having that expertise from either a previous military background, and to be able to get that experience and certification from DRI, to be able to go out in a whole host of different areas that DRI focuses on, from cyber all the way through to the physical side. It's just amazing, and they're really looking forward to it. We're seeing quite a few people ask for us for those assessments and those plans to go into the future.
Okay, now that was the easy part of the question. The second part of the question is maybe a little bit harder. So, as I said, we love bringing veterans into this field. What do you think that the veteran or the recently discharged service member, what do they need to develop to further their careers in disaster recovery, business continuity, risk management, et cetera? What skill set do you think they lack that they need?
That is a great question, because I know the journey that I went on, which was quite interesting. But I think no matter what their specialty or their commands or the environment they served in, having a kind of, an organization like DRI, a nonprofit, to assist in their transition, I find is very critical. Like I said, earlier, when I see that DRI is the oldest and largest nonprofit, an organization, around the world that prepares for and recovers from disasters, with education, with accreditation, with thought leadership, business continuity, disaster recovery, cyber resilience, and the related fields. I mean, you couldn't talk about a better skill set to be able to transition. And as I said, as what I had learned in my journey in transition is having my skills in the military, how do I translate those and hone those into a civilian or a certification or a skill or a mastery? You know, that's what's key in succeeding in that transition and succeeding in the commercial and outside marketplace.
Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We've been talking, you've heard today from Vice Admiral retired, Mike LeFever. Thanks for coming out, Mike, and we're glad to have you at this year's Resilience Summit for DRI.
Yeah, I'm really honored to be a part of it, and I love what you're doing and the passion that you have. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for having me at the summit. Appreciate it.
As part of the Resilience Excellence Summit, we're shining a spotlight on the recipients of this year's DRI Awards of Excellence. We announced them in the DRI 2022 in Las Vegas in February, and we're happy to have the winners here with us for the recognition they so richly deserve. Today, we're starting off with this year's winning teams and their extraordinary efforts. The Team of the Year Award recognizes truly excellent business continuity teams, those who know how to communicate and coordinate their talents and skills, forming a unit that is essential to their organization. This year's winner was the disaster recovery team at Anthem, and representing them today is Kevin Hotaling.
This is a real proud moment for me and the entire Anthem disaster recovery team. We are grateful for DRI for bestowing upon us the 2022 Award of Excellence for Team of the Year. The Anthem Disaster Recovery Team is a highly organized group of disaster recovery professionals, most holding certifications from DRI. We have instituted clearly defined key roles, responsibilities, and parties involved during a DR event or exercise. You'd be hard-pressed to find a disaster recovery team that is as much as a team as the Anthem one, that lives a disaster recovery way, strives to bring professional disaster recovery services to hundreds of thousands of Anthem members, associates, and partners. Anthem Disaster Recovery Team is once again grateful for being recognized by DRI, and we intend to live up to the levels of professionalism this award demands. Thank you.
The Response and Recovery of the Year Award recognizes organizations that were faced with truly challenging circumstances, tackled the problem, brought their organizations back to business, and returned to tell the tale. This year, that organization is Houston Methodist Hospital. Here to say a few words on its behalf is Gene Gretzer.
My name is Gene Gretzer. I am the Information Technology Disaster Recovery Architect for Houston Methodist, a leading academic medical center with 7 community hospitals, numerous freestanding ERs, a large physician organization, and a world-class research institute. I want to thank DRI International for recognizing the Houston Methodist IT Disaster Recovery Team with the DRI Response and Recovery of the Year Award for our efforts to restore critical systems when our main data center experienced a significant power event in April 2021. Our success was attributed to the experience we gained from disaster drills, along with our new cloud-based disaster recovery process. The DR staff, working from home due to COVID restrictions and with limited local network access from power outages, was able to successfully restore all IT systems within the required time. This enabled our caregiver staff to quickly access electronic patient information, which is critical to our patient safety and hospital operations. Thanks again to the Houston Methodist IT DR team and DRI International.
The COVID-19 Response and Recovery of the Year Award is an important way to recognize the courageous lengths our colleagues have taken to address the pandemic and keep their organizations operating safely and effectively through this challenging time. Here for this year's winner, TMX, is Mark Evans, Senior Manager of Business Resilience.
My name is Mark Evans, and I'm the Senior Manager of Business Resilience for TMX Group. I'm also a proud member of the TMX COVID-19 response team with representation from across our global enterprise. As the recipients of the DRI International 2022 Award of Excellence for COVID-19 Response and Recovery of the Year, we are honored to be recognized for the hard work, agility, and resilience of Team TMX. To rise to the persisting challenges of COVID-19, TMX has successfully adapted our working styles, business models, and our communication and continuity strategies. We couldn't be prouder to accept this award from one of the most recognized organizations in the field of business continuity and disaster recovery. Thank you to the Disaster Recovery Institute International, its membership, and its judging panel for this prestigious award.
We'll see you here tomorrow and hear more from our award recipients.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Bullock from BlackBerry, and I'm here to talk to you about BlackBerry's critical event management solution. A bit about me, so I head up the critical event management solutions here at BlackBerry. I've been at BlackBerry in different roles for nearly 16 years. So I'm really pleased to be here to speak to you today. So just shared my presentation on screen, so let's make a beginning. So there's the information about me. So we're going to talk around some of the use cases that customers use BlackBerry's critical event management solutions for, and then go into a bit more detail around the product as well. So on with the presentation. So we're going to talk around some of the use cases that customers here in the UK and around the world use BlackBerry's critical event for to be ready for anything. So the first customer I'm actually going to talk about is the US government, and specifically around the US Capitol building. So if you cast your minds back to the beginning of this year, so January, the US presidential elections had been settled, and the changing of the president was happening from Trump to Biden. But there was a lot of civil unrest at the time happening in Washington around what some people considered as electoral fraud, maybe. And there's a lot of rioting and civil disruption. So we can see here, there's actually a picture of what happened on that day when the rioters actually got through the security personnel who were on guard at the Capitol building and got into the Capitol building. If you know US politics, Capitol building's the big sort of dome-shaped building, sits on the hill in Washington, and that's where all the Senate and sit. So inside there, once the rioters had got in, there was lots of videos shared onto the internet. And here we can actually see a picture that was shared by a reporter who went in with them. And this is actually from inside the speaker's office, so Nancy Pelosi's office. That is her desk, that is her computer. And you see highlighted in the red box, that is a critical event alert from BlackBerry's system telling her to evacuate. So that was sent by the Capitol Police, who secure the area and secure the building. And that was delivered to multiple modes to all the staff within the building, giving them instructions on what to do based on the situation that was happening. So rioters getting in the building, security compromised, you need to evacuate using the procedures that we're going to tell you. So that's the desktop alert on her computer. She would have also received an email, an SMS, and a phone call telling her that information. So she probably evacuated way before she ever saw that pop up on her desktop there. So most of you can relate to that, physical security and how you can secure your personnel should something happen. We've all had issues in our countries. Here in the UK, within London, there's been a few terrorist attacks over the last several years, and we need to account for our staff and make sure they're safe. So in our London office, we've used this when there's been terrorism to check that all our staff are safe and not affected by any of these incidents that are happening. So real good use case. Everyone can relate to this, and a good use case for the BlackBerry's critical event management. And it can be used in all sizes of organizations and all types of use cases where you may have office-based staff that need to be told information if they need to evacuate because of a security incident like this. It could be a fire, it could be any other type of incident. But you may have geographically dispersed staff that are in the country that are traveling, that you need to let them know latest risks. Could be weather risks, could be terrorist risks, or they could be traveling. They could be traveling to regions in the world where there is lots of civil disruption and security isn't so safe. So you need to keep staff communicated to and up to date with the latest information and get a response back from them as well. So it's not just one-way alerting, it is two-way alerting, and you can get a response back. So you can see on that desktop picture there is a button underneath that information that the person could have clicked. The next customer or use case I'm going to talk about is here actually in the UK. So this is Greater Manchester Police. You can see the picture of the policeman with the traditional English police helmet on there. So Greater Manchester Police have around 11,500 users, and that's frontline police officers as well as other staff within the organization. They've deployed the BlackBerry's critical event management solutions across all their staff, and they're doing a number of different use cases. So they alert out to their staff using multiple modes. So they use email, SMS, phone calls, as well as push notifications using the mobile app to get responses back so they can coordinate incidents. So if there was a major incident happening in Manchester, they're able to communicate out to their police staff to tell them what's happening. They may need to get them in from off duty as additional resources to do additional policing activities should there be a major incident, or it could be a routine, maybe demonstration, rioting, a sporting event where you may need to call in additional police officers using overtime to bring them in. So they use it really well as a good resourcing tool, and it's integrated as well with their resource management tool as well. So the system is aware of who's on duty and who's off duty when they're calling in. So you're only calling in the people that are off duty, not people who are already working, as an example. So it's taken resourcing down from a long process of manually calling people up to being able to do that in minutes and having those responses back to say, yes, they're available. Other things we're doing with it is multi-agency collaboration. So as what happened a couple of years ago when they had the concert bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, the hearing and the inquest that's still ongoing for that has cited communication was very siloed with the response from the emergency services. So there wasn't a coordinated, joined up response. So now Manchester Police have the ability to reach out to the other emergency services should there be a major incident. So they can communicate out to the fire service, the ambulance service, the local government, as well as the authorities to let them know and coordinate a response to anything. Everything is audited and reported, so they like that. And then they're using it with some of the geographical functions as well. So what they've done is taken the area of Manchester and split it up into different sectors effectively. So when their officers are out on duty and they're moving around, when an officer moves into a new location, they will actually get a notification on their phone, and that will give them some new information, intelligence of what to look out for in that particular area of the city. So the first day that went live, a couple of officers moved into an area, got a notification, said, look out for this suspect or this person. And within minutes, they had seen that person and were able to make an arrest. So you see how it's changed the way that they're policing. So real good use cases. They're expanding the usage still across how they use it, but they're just some of the highlights that it's used for. They're also using it for welfare checks, polls to ask questions and get responses back from their officers and things like that. So there's lots of other non sort of critical use cases as well that they use it for. And because the way they've been using it, they actually earlier this year won a National Technology Award for Mobile Innovator of the Year. So there is the Inspector Darren Spurgeon there receiving the award for this, and he manages the whole system that's deployed there at Manchester Police. So really good, and we're really proud to jointly receive that award with Manchester Police from the National Technology Awards. So the platform is actually two different offerings. So we have BlackBerry Alert and BlackBerry AtHoc. They're the actual product names of our critical event management solution, and they allow you to be prepared for what you can't predict. So obviously, when you're looking at the solution, you want to be able to use this for any sort of critical events that affect your organization. So you can see a number of critical events there in this slide. One of them being the pandemic as an example that we've lived in for the last 18 months or so. Changes are happening every day with that. So we've got the new Omicron variant that came out this week. How do you communicate all that information out to your staff? If you've got remote staff, changes, policies, they're changing all the time by the government. So this week here in the UK, lots of changes have happened. So you've got to be able to communicate that out to your staff. things like natural disasters, severe weather, cyber attacks, IT system failures. Being able to communicate that with one button out to all your staff and get responses back is very important. And the platform allows you to plan for any of these events. And in planning, it will speed up the mitigation and resolution of that event using this system. So costs, business continuity, reputational damage will be minimized when you use a solution like this. And then this is quite a busy slide, so I'll talk you through it starting on the left-hand side there. So this shows you the communications flow in the application. So typically most customers are using the manual web alerting. So they're using the console, which you can go to the tech stack booth and see. They could be using the mobile phone, or they could be using some of the third-party integrations like ServiceNow, Microsoft Teams. We've got integration with things like Dedrone for drone detection, or any other sort of physical systems. So physical press buttons you can have that can trigger an alert, fire alarms, other IT systems. They go into the very secure critical event management solution. And then on the right-hand side of this diagram, you've got the endpoints that we can reach. So we can reach social media. So if you're an organization with a corporate social media page, you can push updates to that. You can notify desktops, and the pop-up will take over the desktop screen, so you can alert your users that way, much like you saw in Nancy Pelosi's office. So that can be PCs, Apple Macs, laptops the same way, smartphones and tablets via the dedicated mobile app, which allows you to override the sound as well. So if your phone's on silent, you can actually have to turn on the siren so you get the alert. And lots of organizations use that for good effect. We can integrate into your existing voice over IP solution. So your Cisco phones, for example, that have the screens on them can flash up. You can have the speaker turn on, so you get that visual notification. Landlines, cellular, SMS, emails, pagers, fax machines, BBME. These are all supported out the box solutions, so you don't need any hardware to do any of this. And then underneath that, we have got ones that require hardware, and this might be hardware you already have. So public address systems, two-way radios, strobe lights, digital displays can all receive alerts. And you can actually see what that looks like if you pop over to the tech stack booth where we have the demo kit on display there, and you can actually see how that works. So we've got physical buttons that can trigger alerts. We can push information out to screens and digital displays through that, and you can actually see that working on our stand. So why would you use BlackBerry's critical event management? So other than the use cases I've just been talked around, some of the more IT-based information here. So security, BlackBerry has come from a security background. We are a cybersecurity company. Our old devices, when we used to make devices back in the past, were always known as the most secure devices. So security hasn't changed. Our posture is all around security, and this platform has all the relevant security accreditations you'd need, and it's used high up, as you saw, within the US government, and has the relevant security accreditations to be able to do that. It's designed for all sorts of sizes of organizations. So we've got organizations with a couple of hundred users up to a couple of million users on this system. So the US Air Force, the federal governments in the US and places like that are good examples. It will leverage your existing enterprise solutions. So things like Active Directory, HR systems, everything within the system is audited and logged. And it's very granular role-based permission for users that have access to this system on what they can do. As I mentioned, with Greater Manchester Police, it bridges that organisational gap. So you can communicate out securely to other organisations that you work with. So in the case of the US government, they can connect to the other agencies or ministries to let them know if something's happening. Good example in Washington there, and it went to the other different departments. Within Greater Manchester Police, all the emergency services are linked together, the fire and rescue service, the police, the local authority, the ambulance, etc. All have the secure collaboration that this platform brings you. And even if you're not an organization like that, you may have to have the ability to communicate up and down your supply chain. If you had a warehouse burned down, you may need to inform your suppliers to stop shipping to that warehouse. You maybe need to inform your customers that there's going to be a delay to their product because we've got logistics issues or something like that. Flexible how we deploy this, so on-premise all the way up to a highly available cloud, and we have a robust API. Another award we also won this year, so this is the Frost & Sullivan Award. We won that for superior communication and collaboration capabilities and the availability to integrate with any endpoint. So really pleased to also win that award on how we have done a lot of work with lots of customers on how we have their setup done. So that's it from me. That was a very quick 15 minutes overview, but thank you for listening, and it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
This afternoon, we'd like to welcome Raylan Anderson, MBCP, and Bobby Cook from Delta Dental. Raylan is the head of Delta Dental's Business Resilience Program. Prior to Delta Dental, she was principal consultant for BSI Professional Services and the Director of Global Emergency Response and Business Continuity for Applied Materials. And Bobby is the Crisis and Emergency Response Manager within the Business Resilience Group for Delta Dental. Before coming to the company, Mr. Cook was the Senior Manager of Global Emergency Response for Applied Materials. Mr. Cook was a New York State fire officer for 25 years and has been a consultant for subcontractors for FEMA and the Department of Defense. Thank you both for being with us today.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to the DRI Resilience Summit. I'm Raylan Anderson, and I'm the Business Resilience Manager for Delta Dental of California. And today we're going to be sharing a case study on our 4-pillar journey to total protection. The 4 pillars for business resilience include business resilience, which was rebranded from business continuity, crisis management, emergency response, and workplace safety. Joining me today is Bobby Cook, also a manager within our business resilience management team. A little bit about Delta Dental. We are a nonprofit organization with about 3,600 employees. We're the leading oral health benefits to more than 40 million people in its 15-state and District of Columbia operating area. We have offices located in San Francisco, California, which is our headquarters, Oakland and Rancho Cordova, which is near Sacramento, and Alpharetta, Georgia, and Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. So the foundation of our program really lies with workplace safety, and it's the forefront of everything that we do. So we will talk a little bit about the journey, how we are going to be getting to the place that we want to ensure that we have a healthy and safe work environment for all of our employees. Emergency response, 0 to 1 hour for all types of events, whether it's natural, man-made, or technological. If the emergency response goes into extra innings, then we would activate our crisis management pillar. If that is, then we would move into our business resilience organization. Next slide. So here is the team that we've assembled at Delta Dental of California. Terry Chapman is a longtime Delta Dental employee. She's been with the company over 28 years, and she brings a lot of knowledge from the business into the business resilience team. She's a certified business continuity planner, a past president of the Association of Continuity Professionals, the LA chapter, board of directors for Business and Industry Council for Emergency Planning and Preparedness. My co-speaker, Bobby Cook, is in charge of our crisis management and emergency management and safety. He's also a certified emergency manager and business continuity planner. He has a master's in security management and a 25-year firefighter and 911 responder for the World Trade Center. And filling out the remainder of our team is Nell Lee. Nell is our business resilience and emergency management and safety professional. She has associate emergency manager and associate business continuity planner. She has a master's in disaster medicine and management and 15 years in emergency medical services. And we report to the director of the people experience, and I'll share that journey when we go into the next piece. Next slide, Bobby. So I'm going to present just an overview of all four of the pillars and the evolution of where we started and where we hope to be in 2023. So I was hired in December of 2019. And after an internal audit, the business continuity piece was taken out of the technology group and moved into the people organization. So we had some rebranding that we needed to do and developing the pillars and the assessments of the programs for roadmap for 2020. It was a very aggressive roadmap. And so early in 2022 or 2020, we hired additional personnel, built our four pillars with roles and responsibilities, developed the framework, operating model, governance, and stood up our steering committee. And the rebranding really was important because most people associated the business continuity program with the technology DRI. And so we really needed to pull that out and really make it more visible. And then, of course, as everyone knows, COVID-19 happened. And even though we did have a very aggressive 2020 roadmap, we were able to effectively manage that and the pandemic at the same time. My team was responsible for developing the pandemic plan, standing up the pandemic management team, and monitoring everything from CDC requirements to our own internal processes. In 2021, we just redesigned the internal portal for all of the pillars and added a new section for COVID-19. We facilitated quarterly steering committee meetings, and of course, we continued to have our COVID-19 response. We developed procedures, processes, and training because we had fully anticipated that we would be coming back into the offices in the June, July, August timeframe in a phased approach, but that didn't happen. So, but we do have all the training that we did and still can put it into play should we need to. In 2022, we have been really just focused on strengthening our programs and looking at what we have within each of the four pillars and adjusting as needed. We have come to realize that we have to start planning for a new normal. We had anticipated having 100% of our employees back in office in the late 2021 and definitely by 2022. We now currently have only about a third of our employees back in office. A number of folks have been coded fully remote and many are now on a new hybrid schedule. So that really changed some of the ways that we had to think about our program. We're hoping that we will be able to start phasing out all of our COVID-19 response. So it's looking good so far. 2023, we are really going to be aggressive in developing more comprehensive training and exercises. The company as a whole had done very few exercises outside of technology. So we're really wanting to bring some robust exercising across some of the pillars. We want to validate and review all of our existing metrics for all of the programs as well. Next slide. So for the next several slides, we're going to be breaking down the progress that we've made within each one of the four pillars, starting with business resilience. So in 2019, as I mentioned, Terry is a 28-year employee with Delta Dental. So there was only really one person working on business continuity. We had 50% of our plans and strategies that were current. The rest weren't. They were at least the highest priority processes. We had an antiquated business resilience tool, and we were doing manual feeds into all these systems. It would take Terry anywhere between 8 and 12 hours to do those manual feeds. In 2022, we really started working on the foundation for the business resilience pillar. And a lot of what we learned from our response to COVID-19 was instrumental in the redesign of our program. And let me give you a couple of examples. In plans that we had previously, we took a lot of time in figuring out, individual equipment and working from home. And a lot of the information that was gathered really wasn't relevant or necessary. But what we found is that we were not capturing information that we should have been. And so it was really important when we looked at how we wanted to restructure the program. We also went on a hunt for a new business resilience tool and started automating our feeds into the legacy systems that we had. In 2021, we worked with a new vendor to customize a new BR tool. And from the get-go, we automated the feed into that new tool. We began the transition of our BIAs and plans into the new BR tool. And this is something that has been a little bit of a challenge because we're still updating plans in the old tool as we're transitioning new plans into the new tool. And then we also maintain all of our legacy systems. In 2022, we rolled out the new BR program and the tool for everyone, validated and modified our policies and procedures, developed and implemented maintenance and audit processes, and we're beginning to incorporate our state and federal programs into our BR framework. Previously, the company had siloed out the state and federal programs, but we feel that it's important that we are together as one cohesive team. So we're bringing them on board along with the commercial. 2023, we want to have full implementation of our new tool, comprehensive partnerships with all of our personnel for better response and recovery, and then 5-year training and exercise development. And as always, we continue to validate and review our existing metrics. I'm going to turn it over to Bobby to talk about crisis management and emergency response.
Thank you, Raylene. Thank you all for joining us today. I was hired in the very beginning of 2020, just after they announced COVID had reached a level where we had to take notice to it. So the first thing we did was looked at the program as a whole. And they had an enterprise-wide program. That means if they wanted to close the site in Pennsylvania for an ice storm, they were waking people up at 3 in the morning in California, getting people on the phone from Texas. It took a lot of time to assemble people. And then, people in California, were not really participating because they didn't understand, they couldn't see it, they couldn't feel it. So we went to a site-based model. We did all the roles and responsibilities, and we empowered local leaders to actually get their team together and make decisions. And this was on the weather-related, it could have been, workplace violence, it was anything. One thing that we've done is taken a piece of the playbook from FEMA, is we handle everything from a all hazards approach, but we have to tailor certain things like pandemic response and things like that. But for the most part, we use the incident command system, ICS, to run our calls. So once we got done figuring out who was going to be in charge of each site, which was mostly a senior vice president, we allowed them to pick each of the person on their teams. And we placed them in roles in the people organization, the HR function, communications, all the way up to legal. And our structure was able to grow. So if something affected a region or actually the whole company, we would kind of grow into an enterprise level response and have meetings to discuss how this affects the whole meeting. And if need be, we would be able to call in the senior leadership team. So that escalation, which we began in 2021, worked really well. Where we really focused was training. And that was having everybody understand what their roles were at time of disaster. We kind of shied away from checklists because we wanted people to know what their jobs are automatically. A very basic example of that is if something happened involving one of our buildings, facilities would automatically check certain things and have that report ready for the leader to disseminate out to the whole team. So we really focused on site team trainings and position training. And we know that most crises begin at the local level. And while they expand, they pretty much stay at the local level. So there was no more waking people up at 3 o'clock in the morning who probably didn't care. And we put some automated systems in all the way down to the mailroom, that the mailroom, the incoming mail, and we get a lot of mail as an insurance company, would be diverted to another site or held for 24 hours in the case of, let's say, an ice storm. Most of our incidents are announced, if you will. We know the ice storm is coming. We know the hurricane is coming. We know those type of things are coming. So we have a couple of days to prepare. Where we really used our quarterly exercises are for the more acute things, like an earthquake, perhaps an active shooter, any type of thing like that. Because we felt if they could handle those type of events, then the other ones would be pretty easy. So in 2022, we reviewed the teams list to make sure that we had the right people in the right roles. We cross-trained some of them just in case those people were out. We had backups to every position, and the quarterly exercises became more complex. So as people joined in, whether they were new or not, they came together as a team, and that was really important. We also have just completed a senior leadership procedure and almost complete on our exercise for them. We realized that on really bad acute situations, they really haven't had, luckily, had to use any kind of training or exercise for that, but we want to make sure that they're ready, and hopefully we won't get any events. So we've responded quite a bit over the last couple of years, and as Raylene discussed, the COVID response was massive. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next section. 2023 is going to be big for us because we're incorporating our state and federal programs into our structure. Certainly they had things in place prior to that, but one thing that we've done with whether it's safety or business continuity, crisis management, emergency response, is what we call consistency. Everybody gets the same training, everybody does the same process and procedure, and that's by design. This way, if somebody is at one site and has to get involved in another site, we've all been trained the same, so we can all respond the same. So we're going to continue to make some creative exercises, and they're timely. So if we see something happen at another large corporation, we may see how that plays out at Delta Dental. We're also hoping that we have enough people back in the office where we can do a full-scale exercise with the emergency response team and the crisis management team, as well as the business continuity team, and just see how it all works. As we move to emergency response, this is really my wheelhouse, and this is something that, you know, the whole team is really passionate about. We again looked at the program that they had. It was pretty inefficient. Nobody was watching over it. The equipment got outdated and stale. So once we started looking at it, it was a complete redo. Now, we know for a fact that the national average for emergency responders from 911 to arrive actually at your building, at your patient, at your alarm is anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes. In the cities, it could be a little bit longer. And we know that if we have certified people, they can be working on an injured or ill person within 1 to 2 minutes. So we came up with a new structure. As Raylene had said, Nell and me and Raylene have worked together at our previous company, which was a multinational company. So we had some really good experience getting remote teams up and running. So Nell and I are both certified instructors, and we started certifying people in CPR, AED, and first aid. And within about 6 months, we had certified about 70 on-site personnel to respond. We taught them incident management. And then we went to really certify everybody in bloodborne pathogens because we just wanted everybody to be really smart about that, and trained well over 100 people. We came up with a budget, we came up with equipment that could be used, and in the beginning of 2021, we actually made that purchase. In addition to making the site equipment purchase, we also purchased all new automatic external defibrillators, AEDs, because they were quite old and they can't last forever. We continue to recruit people. And like I said, we have about 70 certified team members throughout our major locations. And the other really cool thing we did is we borrowed another page out of the FEMA playbook, or DHS rather, with ready.gov. And we made our own so that we could put things on our website where people could go to and see things that were pertaining to them. So if you want to know what to do with barbecue safety, all the way to hurricane safety to earthquake safety, that's where you'll find it. They can ask questions and we'll give a response. So all these things upped our game, not only on the emergency response level, but as Raylene said, our foundation is workplace safety. So they could find all the information that they need. In 2022, we added additional team members, and we scheduled more courses coming up. The big thing that we were missing was in on-site communications. And that was, how do we get ERT notified that there's a problem? How do we get security to know that we're responding? And how do we let people know we're coming? At the same time, 911 needs to be called in most cases. So we had to come up with an on-site communications program. Initially, we were looking at a third-party dispatch center, but when COVID hit, we had to change our focus to COVID response. Part of our area responsibility was doing entry screening. We had to do the tracing of all of our members that were either infected or, came in close contact. And we had, big list, little list, like many of you. We had a lot of people that were involved, and then not a lot of people, and then a lot of people again. So together, we took all of our 4 pillars and made that response very effective. We are also working on our floor warden program for evacuations to ensure that our people are swept out efficiently and gotten to the assembly areas, and that will also be an ERT function. We had to wait on that because we didn't know who was in the office, who was coming back. As Raylene said, we lost quite a few people to permanent work from home, as well as people that went to a hybrid schedule. But now that we have a pretty good handle on who's in the office and who's coming back, we'll be able to, for lack of a better word, deputize them into the floor warden program. As far as the post-COVID-19, which we're not quite there yet, that's going to require some, kind of retraining on some things, because that's been our focus. What we're looking for in 2023 is to train some of our members in more advanced first aid response. We are going to be looking at incident management on a larger level, and that's through incident management training with people automatically going to their post and doing a job without having to be told, all folding into the site incident commander. We're going to start doing exercises for emergency response. And then, of course, we're going to integrate that with our crisis management team, our business continuity team. And, the bigger we get, the better we'll get. And then we're going to revisit our integration of our new offsite emergency call-out response. And then it'll be time to recertify everybody again. So we're taking this really seriously. We have even, and Raylene will talk about this in a minute, we've looked at safety from people working from home, because they need as much education as people who are working in the office. Our job is to make people safe, and when that's not possible, that we respond efficiently and quickly to help them. So I'll turn it back over to Raylene.
Great, thanks, Bobby. So the safety culture at Delta Dental, when I came on board, and as Bobby and Nell and Terry know, the safety culture was almost non-existent. There were multiple groups that were managing safety, but it was really not being well done or well managed. And so we really wanted to take a look at that because that is the foundation of our entire program. So the workplace safety program that we have implemented meets all of the requirements for Cal OSHA and actually exceeds some of those expectations. The other thing that we wanted to do was do a very comprehensive assessment of the facilities themselves. So looking at, what does the safety culture look like from an audit perspective. So we were able to do these inspections and completed some corrective or asked them to complete some corrective actions for us. In 2021, one of our senior leadership team members offered to be our executive champion for safety. And that went a long way because he was the VP of operations, which is the lion's share of our entire organization. And so he helped us roll out the Safety Champion program. The workplace safety training that is required by Cal OSHA was also not being done on a regular basis. So we completely reworked the entire workplace safety program that is a requirement for all employees to take on an annual basis. We followed up with the individuals that we had sent the corrective actions for in 2020 and did site visits to ensure that these actions were completed in 2021. And then we also relaunched a brand new safety website that Bobby referenced, Delta Dental Ready, and it very much mirrors ready.gov and a couple of other types of sites. But it's a really important place for people to go to for information that's specific to their area. We really wanted to rethink or look through a different lens on what workplace safety means. And by that, we talk about who is in office versus who is permanent work from home. And so we really wanted to try to do something for the individuals that were working from home. So we created a work from home safety training program as well and launched that in 2022. One of the areas that we wanted to focus on because of the nature of the incident and the impact was workplace violence. And we wanted to look at it in a couple of different ways. We didn't want to focus on the response portion, but mostly on the awareness and prevention. So we wanted our employees to be able to look at a situation and determine if it's something that they needed to escalate to people relations, their manager, or even to 911. And so we really did a great job working with our learning development team in putting this program together. It is also a required course for all employees on an annual basis. Included in that is we previously did not have any established safe rooms. And this was important because we do have some of our locations that are in tornado areas, as well as all of our locations could be subject to a workplace violence incident. And so we reworked all of the evacuation maps. And it was, a lot of work done by Bobby and Nell and the facilities teams to get that done. But the safe rooms were important for every reason, for the workplace safety and for tornadoes and such. We are looking at relaunching the Safety Champion program again with a different target audience, knowing now better who's going to be in office full-time versus remote work. In 2022, we are going to start working, or 23, I'm sorry. We're going to start working with our Total Rewards group, which is in the People organization. They're responsible for managing our insurance for work injuries. And so we want to work with them to find out the type and of things that we can reduce those injuries. Safety Champion, we're going to continue to grow that. And we're hoping that we can have safety as a culture adopted by all personnel as soon as we can. Continuing on with our workplace safety program, we wanted to give you some examples of what the work from home safety training looks like. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bobby Cook, and he's going to take you through a portion of our work from home safety program.
Thanks, Raylene. Our mission at Delta Dental is to keep all employees safe. to prevent injuries and illness when possible, and to inspire a culture of safety. But that doesn't have limits as far as only in the office. And that's one of the things with our emergency response team is they can use what they've learned at home, houses of worship, the supermarket, and the gym. And Raylene and I have actually a documented record of some of our team members saving people's lives outside of work based on what we taught them. So with all this new hybrid work or people being coded permanent remote, we want them to be smart and safe as well. One of the first meetings that I attended was a workman's comp meeting, and I heard some of the things that were happening to our people, both at home and in the office, and I felt like we could do better. But the insurance agent was telling us about other things that he's seen over the years, not related to Delta Dental. And one that came to mind was somebody got hurt standing on a counter trying to change a light bulb in their home office. And that was quite costly to the company. So we kind of came together as a team and figured out, how can we make people safer at home? So Nellie took the lead on this. And I just want to give you some examples of how we did this at home. First, we looked at the workspace. We found that people were working on children's desks, they were working on their counters, rickety chairs, all sorts of things. And the big thing is that a lot of people don't have the room, especially if you look in the Bay Area. Apartments aren't very big, it's just the nature of the beast. So we wanted them to have a proper setup. And even me, I work from home, and I could tell that my wrists were starting to hurt, my back was starting to hurt. So I called up our people in charge of ergonomics. They gave me some tips. 2 years later, I'm doing great. But you have to declutter. Little things like that, because we all eat and drink at our desk, so this could happen in or out, but spilling things are bad. So we wanted to make them aware of temperature controls, all the little things that might cause them problems later, and ultimately our workman's comp people. The biggest thing that we see both in and out of the office, which we've really gotten ahead of, is what we call daisy chaining, because people don't have enough power. So they're plugging things into to outlets that were overloaded, or they have extension cords going across their room they could trip on. So we wanted to make them aware of that. And the big thing is, when you're sitting at home, you may have the TV on in the background, you're working, and you forget to get up, because there's no more social situation where you get up to talk to somebody who might be in a cube a few doors down, or you want to go talk to your boss. You're constantly at that computer. So we need to remind people to get up. Delta Dental has a fabulous wellness program. And it's really fun because sometimes there's challenges. Every day at 12 o'clock, you have to walk for 5 minutes, and it goes into a system to track you, or they have how to eat something or cook or whatever. So they're way ahead of this than most companies. The other things that we look at are, home safety. We want to give people some statistics. We want them to know what they're looking at, just to spark them and say, hey, you know what? I do have a 5-year-old at home. I can't watch them at all times because I might be on a meeting. So we want to take extra precaution and put medications away. We want to make sure that our extension cords are not across the floor. So when the visiting grandmother comes into the office, she doesn't trip on them. It's little things like that. So we're trying to keep people safer at home. We talk about getting a fire extinguisher and placing that properly. All these little things go to an increasing safety culture, and that's really pretty important to us. So to get a little more in the weeds about emergency response, we typically have, just a few type of responses, whether it's an evacuation due to somebody pulling the alarm, a drill, or a malfunction. And a medical emergency is really our big one, and hopefully never a workplace violence where the police have to respond. But we've trained our team to take certain positions. Every one of our medical events will have a incident commander who will be pretty much out front. And then when we wait for the fire department or the ambulance to respond, we'll actually have people waiting for them and other people blocking the aisle until we can get that direct hit. What happens is in a lot of companies is the fire department will show up and either A, nobody knows that they were called, or B, they're not exactly sure where the patients are. So what we try to do is to have people ready to escort. It's just that simple. It takes several minutes off the response time, and you know, in medical emergencies, every second counts. So we've made that process really streamlined. And it doesn't even have to be emergency response members. You can just ask anybody, hey, go wait by the front door. Please hold that elevator. Please keep everybody out of the aisle. The whole thing is to train people that they might be called into service. And that's why we spend a lot of time sending out emails and doing electronic billboards, even regular old time, you know, push pin in the paper billboard to let people know how they can help. We have our typical evacuation, which again, we start at the middle. There's only really, think of it like a pitcher and a catcher. The sweeps are the pitcher, the assembly area manager is the catcher. And what we want to do, oops, sorry about that, is we just want to start in the middle, sweep everybody out, check the cubes very quickly, check the bathrooms, offices, and get them out the door. The big thing is to put people by the door so people don't come back in. And over our careers, we've heard all sorts of stories of people stopping for coffee, to get their lunch. The big thing you got to remember is when everybody's outside, if they can't go back in, let's say there's a gas leak or something like that, you really want to teach them to take their stuff with them, even if they're going to a meeting. Because let's say we have to close the facility from, let's say, an earthquake. The building's cracked, nobody can go back in. There's a workplace violence thing, it turns into a crime scene. People can't get back in, and that's a problem. So what we want to make sure is that you tell people as a reminder, as a safety reminder, take your stuff with you, the bare minimum. Medications, keys, ID, wallets. Everything else can be gotten later. Raylene would argue with me, take your computers, because replacing them to work from home for a few days could be problematic. The big thing is that everybody should at least have some basic education on what to do for an evacuation. Once people are in the assembly area, keep them posted, because after about 15 minutes, they will get restless. They will start driving around the parking lot. They'll leave. They'll go to your other buildings. So we really want to have this kind of discussion. For medical things, set it up before. Again, you know, you have your patient, you have your first person to make sure that the scene is safe. You don't want to send people into a situation where there's a light fixture hanging, or there's water, or there's not room to move, or the cube wall moved, or things like that. And have that person in charge who's directing people. Always have, you know, somebody grab on to the patient immediately. That's the whole point of emergency response, is to get somebody on them within 1 to 2 minutes. And we teach them what questions to ask, what to look for, signs and symptoms. They get more help. The big thing, and working for an insurance company, we do, this is like our prime directive, is privacy. Give that person privacy. If they have a medical condition that people know about, that's great. But if they have a medical condition they don't want people to know about, they deserve that kind of privacy. So we kind of block off the area to ensure that happens. Again, if you have any questions, please let Raylene know at randerson@delta.org. We're happy to share information. One thing Raylene and I have learned over more years than we want to admit to is that in safety, in emergency, in crisis, you share the information with everybody and anybody. Because if we can save a life even outside our organization, then we've done our job. And Raylene and I have committed our whole adult lives to doing that. So we thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Raylene.
Thanks, everyone. Again, if you have want any questions answered, please reach out and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you.